get you addicted to a behavior, then it's just as powerful to get you, quote, addicted to a new behavior. A new thought life, completely new, transformed by the renewing of our minds. Listen to this from Mind, Character, and Personality. If Christ be the theme of contemplation, the thoughts will be widely separated from every subject which will lead to impure acts. The mind will strengthen by dwelling upon elevating subjects. If trained to run in the channel, that's an interesting phrase, by the way, run in the channel. This is neurologically accurate. Now, we know that there are channels or pathways, neurological circuits within the brain. Back to the quote. If trained to run in the channel of purity and holiness, it will become healthy and vigorous. If trained to dwell upon spiritual themes, it will naturally take that turn. But this attraction of the thoughts to heavenly things cannot be gained without the exercise of faith in God, as an earnest, humble reliance upon Him for that strength and grace, which will be sufficient for every emergency. Another quote from Mind, Character, and Personality, we read, all are free moral agents, and as such they must train their thoughts to run in the right channel. The first work of those who would reform is to purify the imagination. Our meditations should be such as will elevate the mind. Whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are honest, whatsoever things are just, whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are of good report, if there be any virtue, and if there be any praise, think on these things. Here is a wide field in which the mind can safely range. There's a lot of freedom of the mind. God said to Adam and Eve, you can eat from any tree in the garden. Just that one, watch out for. And so much of life in God's world is freedom. When you find out that the tree you've been obsessed with and you can't help but go back to, and you think that's everything because that's all you know and your brain is totally accustomed to only going there, all of a sudden, once you're freed from that, you go, man, life is way better. There's so much more joy, so much more peace, so much more fun out in the rest of God's world with this safely wide range that He's given us for our thoughts to go. Another quotation from Mind, Character, and Personality. If Satan seeks to turn the mind to low and sensual things, bring it back. When corrupt imaginings seek to gain possession of your mind, flee to the throne of grace and pray for strength from heaven. By the grace of Christ, it is possible for us to reject impure thoughts. Jesus will attract the mind, purify the thoughts, and cleanse the heart from every secret sin. Secret sin, by the way, is a euphemism for the behavior we're talking about here. Reading on. The weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but mighty through God, casting down imaginations and every high thing that exalteth itself against the knowledge of God, and bringing into captivity every thought to the obedience of Christ. So you see, every thought can be taken captive to the obedience of Christ. And that's a promise. This is not something I work out in my own strength. The Bible says in 1 Corinthians 10:13 that God will not let you be tempted beyond what you can bear, but He will provide a way out. We also read from Romans 6:16, do you not know that to whom you present yourselves slaves to obey, you are that one's slaves whom you obey, whether of sin leading to death or of obedience leading to righteousness. So you could actually be a slave to righteousness. I want to be impulsively obedient. I want to get to the point where when I am doing the Lord's will, I am but carrying out my own impulse. And since our minds are so habituated, so habitual, so prone to habit, good or bad, that is good news for greater victories, for a more habitual obedience. Now I want to show you something on the screen right now. You see a healthy control group on the left and a drug abuser brain on the right. Notice the middle part of the healthy control group, the dark orange portions. What those are the pleasure centers within the brain. The darker portions represent more activity. And so within a healthy brain, there's a lot of pleasure. Simple pleasures in life take place, and that area fires off. Now look back at that one on the right. You notice it's not much orange there. The drug abuser does not find much pleasure in life. It's the same thing whether you're a video game addict or a pornography addict or whatever. The normal pleasures of life begin to be dull. Life as God designed it begins to be uninteresting. And we start needing to go back to that other thing in order to get any pleasure in life. But the good news is, once you become a slave to righteousness, this is the kind of change that can happen. You see a methamphetamine user in the middle, 1 month from coming off of his drug. But look at 14 months of abstinence from his drug. The orange has returned, just as in the healthy control brain, and those pleasure centers are lighting up again, and he's starting to find happiness, peace, and joy. Dopamine is being released in his brain now from things like delayed gratification and intellectual stimulation, accomplishing difficult tasks, whatever it might be. We're rebuilding the brain's pleasure and motivation centers. And so, as you come off of this, as you come into a new brain, a completely new life, this is your renewed brain. The way the brain is supposed to look. And listen to this one too from Wired for Intimacy. Dr. Struthers tells us, imagine that you could be neurologically enslaved to purity rather than porn. Enslaved to seeing the dignity of each individual rather than their utility to you. The process of sanctification is an addiction to holiness, a compulsive fixation on Christ, and an impulsive pattern of compassion, virtue, and love. For the full seminar, A Greater Lust, I gave it the subtitle, Enslaved to Purity in a Pornographic World. Enslaved to purity in a pornographic world. We can be in these last days when the devil has this final last-ditch temptation, when we're on the borders of the heavenly Canaan. He comes in, I'm going to bring the Moabite women in. This is the very, very ace card to capture these men's souls. Right in the midst of the most pornographic world in the history of our earth, you can be enslaved to purity. So I encourage you to view not only the entirety of A Greater Lust,